Part 4, defense wins championships. And I'm out here. This is, by the way, a different day. The part 3 it's a different day, another 75-degree day. But again, the hoodie for Bill Belichick and that look of defense. And we're up to now Super Bowl 34. But I did skip Super Bowl 31. Elway won 32 and 33, of course. And I skipped Brett Favre winning his Super Bowl over Bill Parcells, New England Patriots. And Bill Parcells always is going to have defense first, with Drew Bledsoe there as his quarterback. Again, he's developing a defense there. Bill Belichick is Belichick was his defensive coordinator that year. I'm not sure. It may have been Al Groh. It may have been Al Groh. I don't know if Belichick was there. I think he was, but again, I could be mistaken. Again, not looking up anything here, but certainly they had McGinnis and Seymour, and they're starting to get put together a defense. I'm about to say Ty Law. I don't even know if Ty Law was there. Certainly, it was a very good defense. And again, I'm contending that at that time period there were no dominant defense. If you could find one that doesn't have an offense that gives the ball away, then I have been shown that at least those few years, offenses could win championships. Again, I am contending. Here comes a truck that I said that also gives the feel of defense. I'm contending that certainly most of the Super Bowl years, almost all of the 50 years of Super Bowl winners, almost all of them have an emphasis on defense over offense. And the years that offense wins, there were no dominant defenses. Okay, we're gonna build. I'm getting more detailed we'll get more detailed as we get to the more modern era, where you youngsters could follow, have seen the last 10 years, and we'll really break it down when we get there. This is going to be, I don't know how many parts. We're already up to part 4, and we're only up to Super Bowl 34, and of course 34 and 35 brings us to the era of the greatest show on turf. Now this is one of my favorite topics, because there you go. Now listen. I mean, Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, and all these receivers, Isaac, who are the St. Louis Rams? I shot Ali Sheik, that one with the that name. They had some great receivers there. They've got Kurt Warner, and this is the greatest show. This is a really high fly. You may want to call them the best offense ever. You could say that. You could say it's maybe the best offense ever. Greatest show on turf, and they were juggernaut. They didn't. Martz did not hold anything back. He was coming at you, being aggressive, attacking, and they used Marshall Faulk well in the run and pass. And they go and win Super Bowl 34. Now, I'd like to point out that they, first of all, very underrated, very, 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 very underrated defense. People forget how good a defense they had, and they created turnovers. I mean, they were scoring. There was a time period during that year they were scoring every week on defense. I mean, that's how opportunistic they were on defense. Very athletic defense, a very fast defense. Not even going to bother with names, because I can't even remember the names of the famous ones. I'm going to remember the names of the non-famous St. Louis Ram defense there. But they were fast, and they caused turnovers, and they were a force. Now, did they face a dominant defense at that time? Now, in the championship game, well, first of all, their first game, they faced a Viking team that had no defense, so they easily scored in the high 40s. No problem there against Randall Cunningham and the Vikings. But then they go and meet a dominant defense, which at that time, if you could show me that Tampa Bay was a dominant before that, again, you might be able to say, well, why didn't Tampa win a Super Bowl in the Super Bowls 31, 32, 33? Where were they during those years? I'll tell you one thing. They had a quarterback named, can you name it? Sean King. See, that name I remember. Sean King was the quarterback for that championship game. Sean King is not good. No, that's not good to have him as your quarterback. Who else did they have on offense? I don't know. That's not good. Now, again, even I, who bad with names, I should be able to name some of them. What was the final score in that game? Tampa Bay, with their dominant defense, with Derek Brooks, Warren Sapp, I think those guys were there for that year. They Yeah, that's a Tony Dungy-led defense, right? Tony Dungy-led defense. I'm pretty sure that's a Tony Dungy-led defense. Tony Dungy, the coach. Tony Dungy, the coach, but he was in charge of the defense. The final score in that game was 11-7, if I recall. Sorry, 11-6. It was 6-5 going into the last 2 minutes of that game. Last few minutes of the game. Kurt Warner had to rely on a long 70-yard touchdown throw to take the lead. They missed a 2-point conversion, and they ended up winning 11-6. 2 of those points obviously was a safety if they were losing 6-5. I mean, they just there's an example of a great defense slowing down maybe the greatest offense. And in the Super Bowl, it wasn't like Kurt Warner threw for 414 yards. In that game, they did get a lot of yards, but that was a game that Tennessee Titans and Jeff Fisher and Greg Williams, they slowed down they caused Warner to be sloppy, or maybe he was bad in that game. A lot of penalties in that game. That game was 16-0. Then it became 16-up as the Eddie George and the Steve McNair. Steve McNair was not a sight to see in that Super Bowl. He was not, except for a few plays on the last drive, and that's what they always show. And you think Steve McNair had some type of good Super Bowl because of that great play where he eludes the rush and is able to complete it. He athletically eludes the rush and is able to complete it down to the 8-yard line or within 10 yards before the famous Mike Jones tackle. So, McNair was no good in that game. So there's no offense to speak of in Tennessee. Tennessee held that game close because of their defense. And that slowed down the greatest show on turf. Again, I'm here to say, but defense wins championships. So why didn't they win the championship again? Steve McNair was just not good enough. I'm blaming that on the offense. I think the defense did a very good job there. By the way, did Tennessee have a dominant defense? No, I'd say more of a hard-hitting, excellent defense. Not a dominant defense, but excellent, hard-hitting. And it came down, isn't it funny that St. Louis, with all the greatest show on turf, it came down to a great tackle by Mike Jones on the last play to save it from being tied, which would have sent it to overtime. They win 23-16. So they do get a Super Bowl, but the struggled to score in the championship game against Tampa. I would call that a struggle in the Super Bowl. And of course, next year in the Super Bowl 36, Kurt Warner certainly struggled against Bill Belichick's defense in Super Bowl 36. We're going to hold the New England era for our next production. But first, we finish with talking about, of course, one of the greatest defenses of all time, and that is the Baltimore Ravens of Super Bowl 35. They went out and smacked around the Giants that day. Giants who didn't really, I don't know if they should have really been there. Again, any team that makes it, they deserve to be there, but it wasn't exactly a competitive game, and I didn't expect it to be a competitive game. Collins threw about 5 interceptions. After scoring 40 points off, again, a Swiss cheese Viking defense, who in that game, I have a couple of friends and a relative that we said were Viking fans who said, why don't they try to cover the receivers in that game? Like, why are they giving 10-yard cushions? Anyway, but Collins was able to take that apart, but he got killed by Ray Lewis. And Tony Siragusa, the fat guy in the middle. And secondary was tremendous. Oh, if I could remember these secondaries. If I could just remember who they had. Bart, Scott, they had, let's see, give me some linemen here. Give me some other, any famous, I don't know how many, so many famous, but a very rugged, hard-hitting defense, of course, led by Ray Lewis. And that's another question you could ask me again, why didn't Baltimore do that in other years? So did they have all their players there for all those years? What was going on? And they remember, now, again, on my side, they're doing this with Trent Dilfer. So obviously they're not doing this as much of an offense. It's just a guy that don't throw an interception. And he was actually a little slightly decent in that Super Bowl. Threw a touchdown pass to Brandon Stokely and beat Jason, that model-looking cornerback for the Giants. If I could just get the name, Jason Sehorn. They beat him for a 50-yard touchdown. But there was a pick six in that game. That was obviously one on defense, 34-7. The only touchdown the Giants even got was a kick return. So dominant defense. By the way, it should be pointed out that the Baltimore Ravens were not the best team that year. They played a game in the playoffs against, guess who? The Tennessee Titans, who also had a rugged defense. As a matter of fact, people don't notice, Tennessee Titans actually gave up less yards with the number one rated defense that year. Would you believe that? In a year where Baltimore had one of the best defenses ever, Tennessee was actually the number one rated defense. And now Baltimore gave up less points, but the number one rated, which again, I don't go by stats, but just to show you that Tennessee's defense is nothing to sneeze at. And Tennessee had a little bit better offense. They had Steve McNair, they had Eddie George. And the only reason they won that game, and everybody remembers this game, there's only one reason. It was in Tennessee. All Baltimore managed was 7 offensive points, and they were losing 10-7 or 13-7 in critical time in the game. I don't know, again, the numbers elude me, but I do know that the reason they lost was because of a guy named Al Del Greco, the kicking game. There was a comedy going on at one point where he kicked and missed a field goal. There was a penalty. He got to kick it again. Then the referee blew the whistle early or something like that. He kicked, he missed it. Then they moved to 5 yards. Then he kicked it again and missed it. It was a comedy. And then, of course, the big play in the game, a blocked field goal, which would have clinched it. Not clinched it. It would have put him up 6. There was no way Trent Dilfer was going to come down the field and score a touchdown in the last minutes against the Tennessee defense. Trust me on that. No way. They were lucky to get the first touchdown because Sterling Sharp happened to be open down the left side, and what he was doing open, I'll never know, but they got lucky and broke one big play in the game. But blocked, returned for a touchdown. Now it's Eddie George and Steve McNair trying to score against Ray Lewis and the Baltimore defense. That wasn't going to happen either. Ray Lewis gets the pick six. Ray Lewis with the pick six, and that clinched that game. But really, Baltimore, Tennessee, great defensive teams. Tennessee, I believe, would have won the Super Bowl, also would have beaten the Giants rather easily. And again, another great defensive team, defense winning championships. We're now getting to the New England era. We're also getting to an era called free agency. And you were not able to keep the teams if you developed a great defense. You weren't able to keep them. Any great players, certainly, you have to decide where you're going to put your money. You can't have great players at every position, and that's going to be one of the greatnesses of Bill Belichick, to be able to maintain a great team all through these years under a salary cap. And let's see, we got the truck, we got a lot of we're talking defensemanship, but we need your help. Again, I could be just blowing hot air. You go, what is he talking about? What about this team? What teams am I forgetting? I think I've shown that most of the year is a defense. We got the Baltimore Ravens there. We got the... now again, on this edition, a lot of the teams I said that won were offensive teams, and I'm claiming there weren't dominant defenses. What about Tampa Bay? How long were they dominant for with Derek Brooks and Warren Sapp in that defense? They do end up winning Super Bowl 37 on defense, beating the number 1 rated Rich Gannon Oakland Raiders. But what about the Philadelphia Eagles with Buddy Ryan? I'm trying to remember, is there any other dominant defense that I'm forgetting that should have stepped in there and won? Because there are, the Green Bay Packers is an offensive-minded team with Favre. The Denver with Elway and Terrell Davis was offensive, a better offense than defense. And the 49ers and Cowboys of the 20 Super Bowls, 26, 27, 28, 29, and the Redskins as well were more offensive-minded teams. I did point out they beat Buffalo 4 times. Buffalo was a weak defense, average defense. A lot of athletes, but can be picked on defense. So, it's room to debate. Get in there and say your comments so I can finally look up some stuff. I want to look up and see what was going on there. I'm just going by memory here, and who can remember all this? And that's part 4. Defense wins championships. How about that Giant defense?